Hey, it's Aaron, and today we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Paris, France. And, oh, sorry, I forgot that I was wearing this. It's a little bit cold outside. I thought I'd dress for the occasion, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the topic of this video, I assure you. Anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Paris, France, and then hopefully we can dovetail that into the topic of this video today, and try to get some kind of resolution out of all of this. So let's get started. So today in Paris, France, currently, as we speak, there is the largest nationwide general strike happening with everyone all the way from the public transportation industry all the way to the airports, and everybody is furious on account of some new laws that were put into place by President Macron. Even the firefighting department, even the firefighters have gotten involved in this general strike. And like I said, it's the largest nationwide strike that's happened in decades. And it's absolutely wonderful to see people out there in the streets actually fighting against oppression and actually fighting for their rights. It's unbelievable. And my heart goes out to every single one of the protesters that are there, that are doing what they can to stop all of the horrible draconian laws and what they call a dictatorship from happening there in France. So my heart goes out to every single one of you, and solidarity, comrades. But that doesn't mean that we here in Canada and the United States should be sitting on our hands waiting for somebody to come save us, because clearly that is not going to happen, and we need to be using tactics very similar to the ones that are being used in France, or else we're never going to see any real change within our system. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some tactics that are used by a certain group of protesters that have been incredibly useful in the past, to say the least. Now, I'm going to say right up front that I am not going to condone nor condemn any of the tactics that I'm talking about today. I'm clearly just doing this as an educational video, kind of giving you the basic information about this sort of thing. And I think that it's important to talk about this because more leftists and basically everybody needs to know what these groups are actually about. And that's hopefully what I'm going to do today, is explain a little bit about that. So what am I talking about? Obviously, from the title of this video, you know I'm talking about the Black Bloc. And I'm going to start off by saying that Black Bloc is not a group of people. Well, I mean, there is groups of people that use Black Bloc, but Black Bloc is a tactic, not an organization. Basically, it's a tactic that's used by anti-fascist and Antifa groups and socialist, communist, anarchist groups all across the board that involves wearing black. That is basically the defining characteristic of Black Bloc. Now, what does that mean? What exactly is Black Bloc? Okay, well, bloc is the gear that you're wearing. It's all black and hopefully indistinguishable from most of the other people that are within your group. And usually it involves wearing a hoodie, possibly some sort of face covering that makes sure that you can hide your face from facial recognition software, or possibly stop any sort of pepper spray or stuff like that from getting on your face. And it's basically a protective set of gear that you wear when you're entering into a protest. That is basically Black Bloc. When people are talking about Black Bloc tactics, they're basically talking about that. Though there are many other things that are involved in those Black Bloc tactics, that's basically the defining feature, is the people are wearing black, usually hoodies, with their faces covered. Now, I've talked many times in the past about how covering your face can be a good or bad thing, but it really depends on the situation that you're in. If you're in a completely peaceful situation and you're not worried about being attacked or being singled out or being found in any kind of way, then definitely not going to a protest with a mask on would be beneficial, because unfortunately there is a certain amount of optics that we have to pay attention to. But optics are not the only thing that matters. A diversity of tactics matters, and a lot of the time optics are going to be against you anyway. So most of the time when you're entering into a protest, you want to make sure that your face is covered and that you are concealed to a certain extent. Now, the whole point of everybody dressing in black or Black Bloc is that everybody kind of looks like the same kind of person. Everybody kind of has the same kind of look to them, very similar to a uniform. You look like a unified mass of people, and not any single person is able to be singled out because they all look generally the same. Of course, we're anarchists. I'm not going to say that every single person needs to be wearing a uniform, but generally having a similar type of look is beneficial when you're trying to do these certain black bloc tactics. Now, these black bloc tactics, they are incredibly important when it comes to defense. But a lot of people, when they're thinking about black bloc, the first thing they think about is not defense, it's violence. And that's what I'm going to talk about here right now. So when people think about black bloc, they think about violence. They think about people smashing windows and starting fires and hitting others with batons and knocking little old ladies out of their walkers and shit like that. And I have to say right now that that interpretation of black bloc is extremely overblown by the media. Now, there is a certain amount of property damage that does happen within certain groups of people, but most of the time it doesn't have to do with damaging property or attacking people. It has to do with protecting people the people that are vulnerable in situations where they could actually themselves be attacked. So a lot of the time what they'll do is they'll line up and they'll create something known as a phalanx, or basically a protective wall between them and people that are in danger or possibly could be victims of any kind of real attack, and they are the ones that are standing in the way of that. We call them basically the boots on the ground. A lot of anarchists joke around and say that these are the troops that you're supporting when you say we support the troops. They're the people that are down there that are making sure that the people that are vulnerable aren't going to be attacked. And yes, that most of the time does mean that they're the ones that are going to be punching Nazis. Unfortunately, that is just a fact of life, that when Nazis start to try to attack people and do things that are dangerous to certain individuals in that group, then punching them, getting them out of there, is sometimes necessary, and they use violent tactics to do that. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm not going to condemn nor condone any of that violence, but I am going to tell you what they basically do. So that's some of the tactics that they use, but what you have to realize about black bloc is that it's not only about making sure that people are protected and making sure that you're wearing black and having your face covered. It's about being extremely organized and prepared when entering into a protest situation. When you're talking about people that are wearing all black and they're actually in that black bloc look, there are people that have been there in the past and they know the dangers that are involved in being in some sort of demonstration when it involves the government or the state or fascists and Nazis, and they want to prepare accordingly. So being incredibly tactful and knowing a lot about how to prepare for those sorts of things is important. And I'm going to go through a couple of those tactics right now. So like I was saying, when you're involving yourself in any sort of protest, in any sort of action, you want to make sure that you are a very careful organizer. You want to take a look at the entire map of that city. You want to make sure that you single places off into districts and into certain sections. And when you have them sectioned off into those districts and sections, then you can actually work with unifying affinity groups so they can cooperate together to protect those districts. Now, like I said, I'm not condemning nor condoning any of the things I'm talking about. I'm just giving you information. This is how it's done. So basically, an affinity group, for those of you who don't know, is a small group of people, usually between 3 and 10 individuals, who are able to work with other affinity groups in basically a protective manner so they can watch certain individual places. Some of the time there is team leaders that are elected or assigned. Sometimes it's a rotating cast of people, but basically the way that they function is from a ground up situation rather than a top-down hierarchy. Like I said, they use team leaders, and even sometimes they have reserve team leaders just in case the initial team leaders are taken down in some way, be it by arrests or incapacitation or whatever. They also make sure that they map out a lot of escape routes. If you're going to be doing a demonstration and you are not as heavily armored as your opponent, like the state or the police would be, then you're going to have to make sure that you know the areas that you're in, and you're going to have to use a lot of guerrilla tactics. And knowing certain amounts of guerrilla tactics and knowing escape routes are things that these black bloc protesters definitely try to do, because you have to if you're going to be the underdog. So They make sure that they know escape routes, and then they also make sure that they know other things like formations. Now, formations are extremely important when you're talking about any sort of battle, but when you're in a protest, formations are basically the same kind of thing, but in a protective sense. You're not trying to attack necessarily, but like I said, you're usually trying to protect. And one of those formations is known as the phalanx. A lot of people know what that is. It goes way back to ancient Rome. It's basically where a line of people are standing there with shields and spears, and behind them is another line of people with shields and spears, and so on and so on and so on. And they create a protective barrier that's able to be an offensive and a defensive front. Usually they'll have their spears out so they can attack, or they'll have their shields up so they can protect. It's a very similar when you're looking at certain protests and formations when you're doing things that way. I'm not saying that a lot of people are bringing spears to these situations, but they do form similar sorts of formations. So you're going to see groups of people that are situated as a line with shields, helmets, that sort of thing, and protecting people that are in behind them. Like I said, vulnerable people that could be attacked. And this works as a great barrier and a wall between them and the opposing force, who oftentimes is going to use extremely harsh tactics to attack these people. So you're going to see things like tear gas grenades and that sort of thing, water cannons being launched at these individuals. Those people with the shields, or whatever it is, makeshift shields, sometimes it can even be garbage cans. There's one off in the background. I was going to pull it over, but I won't. And you can use that for water cannons, because the water will actually spray at the back of the garbage can and go inside the garbage can and actually fill it up. So you can use that as a shield because it'll actually become heavy. It's kind of a clever way to do it. Or you can use regular shields, and that sort of thing creates a certain barrier, so the people in behind can catch, say, smoke grenades or canisters and hurl them back. Now, you're also going to see a lot of these individuals making sure that they're wearing protective equipment, such as face masks, gas masks, helmets, body armor, abrasive resistant clothing, heavy gloves for when they grab those canisters, which are extremely hot, so they don't get burned. All of these tactics are extremely important, and they're all things that they use so they can have at least a certain amount of an upper hand when it comes to a protest situation. You have to remember that 99% of the time, protests don't start to become violent because of the protesters. They become violent because of the state, because of the police presence that's involved, and that's what makes those sorts of things blow up. So people have to be prepared for that. They have to know that these sorts of situations are going to happen, and they have to work towards making sure that they are safe in those situations and not in a position where they could get injured. Like I was saying, there's a lot of protective equipment, and then there's also things that you want to carry in, say, a kit. A lot of those things could be an extra set of clothes, special liquids that you can mix together that can wash off pepper spray or mace, certain things that you can use to protect yourself when you are trying to breathe in smoke-filled air, goggles, a lot of different things. There are a myriad of different things that you would want to keep in your kit, and it's very much specific to the kind of protest that you're involved in, or that these Black Bloc protesters would be involved in. So with all that being said, there's also communication. They're highly communicative individuals, and they communicate extremely well, but I'm not going to talk about how that is done because that would just be giving away too many secrets. But one of the things I want to talk about just before I go is one of the things that I actually seen happen at these protests in France that sparked me to want to make this video, and that was basically something called an unarrest. It's a tactic used by many anarchist and Black Bloc groups to basically save their fallen comrades. Sometimes you will have an individual, actually I'll give you a perfect example of exactly what happened in this protest. There was an individual that was knocked down by the police, and they had their hands behind their back and they were about to be arrested. And before they were able to get the cuffs on them, all of their comrades formed a phalanx, or basically a line, and ran towards the police, basically rushed them and knocked them over, and they were able to grab their comrade and pull him out of this pile of police and actually bring them to safety where they didn't have to worry about the police brutality or being arrested or anything like that. That's basically one way to do something called an unarrest. And I have to admit, seeing that secondhand in a video, finally, like, right in front of my eyes, was really cool, because I've heard about it before, but actually seeing somebody do it was really inspiring, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video. So, like I was saying, I don't condemn nor condone any of the things that I'm talking about in this video, any of the tactics that Bloc uses, but I did think it was interesting that we do talk about it and let you all know a little bit more about it. Like I was saying, they're not all about violence, they are about protection, they are about fighting against fascism. A lot of anti-fascist groups use this tactic, and it's a way of making sure that the protesters stay safe and stay prepared and basically do the best that they possibly can to fight for our freedoms. So I really want to thank everybody that's out there that's doing activism and who is out in the streets, especially right now in France, that's doing what they possibly can to fight the system and to fight for equality. And that's my show. My name is Aaron. If you do get a chance, check me out on Patreon. Every dollar does help fund this show. Thanks for watching.